Hi, Karen. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so delighted to have you here. So my first question to my guest is always to give them a little space here to introduce themselves to the listening and watching audience about who they are and what they do. And then I've got a couple more questions and then we'll get into the interview.
My name is Karen Docherty. I am a spirit medium, psychic medium, some people prefer to use, but basically my mediumship is what I do, which is connecting to those on the other side. And I've done that for most of my adult life anyway. But, you know, I'd seen spirit as a child as well. And that's kind of how it all started. And then as the years have gone on and I've progressed and developed my mediumship, I've worked with it ever since.
Yeah, I'm excited to unpack that story with you. It's really interesting. My second question is, I'm always curious about everybody's early childhood experience with religion, spirituality, or nothing at all, and then how they found themselves as an adult anchoring themselves in spirituality or any kind of, whatever you're anchoring yourself in. But like, what was that story for you growing up?
So I wasn't really brought up with any religion at all. I mean, my dad's side of the family were raised Catholic and they practiced that while they were children. But when they grew up, and so obviously in my lifetime, they didn't really practice that religion, although obviously I heard things about it over time. But my grandmother on my dad's side, she was very spiritual and she was actually mediumistic, which I learned much later. But she just used to say things, always say your prayers, or we all have the same God. And so it was more like an open kind of feel, a spiritual kind of feel for me. But, even in that, it was her that kind of recognized within me about the spirit side of things, that I could see people and hear people. And she didn't make a big deal about it at that moment in time, but looking back, that I can see that now much more. So growing up, I always kind of felt within myself really to believe, and that there was that other place, as I used to call it. And it never really occurred to me to think anything other than that. And I suppose because inherently I could feel spirit, so it was quite a natural thing for me. So it wasn't, and I did actually, when I was maybe about 15, I started to kind of look at religion and kind of go to the local church and, different churches around the area to see how it all felt. And for me personally, it just all felt like, yeah, this is about spirit. This is about the higher source. This is about God, whatever everyone calls that something different, I suppose. But for me, that's what it's always been.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And then, so your grandma, was there anyone else that had that kind of gift either, or was just literally just her?
Her sister actually worked as a medium, and I didn't know that either until I was like in my late teens, early 20s. But yes, so both of them, her and her sister, were obviously very mediumistic. And I do recall when I was younger, like maybe 3 or 4, I do recall my grandmother doing tea leaves and people coming to her house and she would do little readings at the kitchen table. So I do recall that, but she never really went further than that with it, and she didn't talk about it. And I suppose back then it wasn't as open as it is now. It wasn't an open subject. So when she used to say things to me like, here's Karen, she brings spirit with her, that was just her observation more than anything else. And I guess she was trying to make it as natural for me as possible.
That's really beautiful and really interesting that she could see it in you as well. And she sounds like a very powerful woman. So when we think, there's like the spectrum of spiritual gifts, right? And when we think about psychic mediumship, like you talked about, like, I think your focus is communicating with the other side. So I wanted to ask you, when you do that, what are some of the things that you are helping people connect with on the other side with? Like, what would somebody be coming to you about to talk about specifically to get in touch with somebody on the other side? Why are we still having those conversations?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard for people when they lose someone to spirit. When someone passes away, I think that's when people start to question, where are they, or are they still here? Could there be a possibility that they do exist still somewhere else? And I think that drives people to kind of look out for mediumship. But also I feel like it's about their healing. It's about that healing aspect to it, where maybe they need something from that loved one to just help them put closure to something or help them understand, or maybe they didn't get their final words. And I just feel like whatever happens, the healing takes place in the spirit side of things as well, because let's say it was a father in the spirit world, excuse me, he might need to connect with his daughter to say something or just to let her know that he's still there, which would give him healing as well. So the healing does take place on both sides.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting when I was reading your work. I was going to ask you about that. Like, what does that actually mean? I think we assume, I know definitely I did before I went on my own spiritual journey, that there would have to be like this sort of like very hard line in the sand when we die, and there's so much completion there. But if there's other healing that needs to happen once they've gone over, does that mean they linger with us? Do they stay with us until we're healed inside? Like, how does that work?
Well, they are always with us. I don't mean 24 hours a day, but they are always there. They are just a thought away, so they're never really, I think this is
Mm-hmm.
a misconception where I think people think once someone's healed, does that mean their mother in the spirit world doesn't come and visit anymore, or she moves on with her life over there?
Right.
It doesn't quite happen that way. They are always there. But yes, when someone's going through turmoil or grief or needs that connection, it might feel more intense or more often. And then when we don't need quite as much contact or connection, then yes, it will feel like less intense. But they're always there to
Mm-hmm.
help. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you find it hard to work with so much grief? Because I imagine people are coming to you with like really heavy emotional grief. But for you, being the facilitator of those conversations, how do you handle like the heaviness of all the grief and the emotion? I'm assuming you're very empathic as well. So,
Yeah.
how do you handle that?
Yeah, it is. It's hard sometimes, and as the medium in the middle of it all, you can let those things weigh on you if you're not developed enough to know how to detach from it, because and you're a person as well, so you're going to feel those things. Aside of the
Yeah.
mediumship, I'm going to feel someone's grief or feel their turmoil or their pain. And so it's hard for me then just to say, at the end of the session, right, that's it now, and the session's done, and never give it another thought. I just couldn't be like that. So you do have to learn to be able to step back from it. But at the same time, as a medium, you're always going to feel that for someone, and it's just about talking to them and helping them and giving them advice maybe on how to go forward even after the session, I think is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I lost a couple family members right back to back, and that really basically dumped me into a rabbit hole of trying to understand what happens out of the context of my religious experience growing up, which was also Catholicism. And they're very clear about what happens to you after you die. They don't believe that anymore. And I really wanted to understand like NDEs and like the spirit world. After my youngest brother passed away, like he would send me signs, and I would be like, it would be so compelling that it was
Yeah.
like undeniable that it was him trying to reach me or communicate to me. And just recently, I just last week had a reading with a psychic astrologer, and my like maternal grandfather came through, who I've never spoken to, never met. He died before I ever entered this world. So like I would have never known him. And I'm like, he came through very clearly. And I thought, wow, this is so wild. And he's like, he was saying he wanted to help me in my life. And I just thought, this is so freaking cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And you need that. I think even like your grandfather, you didn't know him in the lifetime, but you would have known him before
No.
you came here, because obviously he's your soul family and you're connected. And your anyone in your soul family, it doesn't matter if you knew them in the lifetime or you didn't, that are still going to be connected and that are still going to bring that through when it's needed or when they feel the need to. With the religious side of things, I do think that sometimes it promotes fear rather than anything else. This feeling
Yes.
of, if you don't live a certain way, then this is what will happen, or you won't get to this place, or whatever it might be in different religions. And I just feel, well, surely then it doesn't make sense to put people in a state of fear if they're believing in something and praying to their God, and then they're fearful of how they conduct themselves or live. We all have free will, so your intention is everything. And when we go over to the spirit world, no matter how we pass, it doesn't matter how it happens, we all go to the same place, and we are all met with love, and we are all met with our family. So I think the spiritual aspect to things for me, what I try to tell people is that element of, your loved one is safe, they are fine, they are there, and kind of bring that evidence through the mediumship as well. And it just puts their mind at rest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the fear thing is such a real thing if that's the kind of indoctrination you receive, and then you wonder, like, are they okay? Which I love that you just said that, because that's really important. I'm really curious for you in terms of like reincarnation and how we are tethered to each other, and the light we all carry within ourselves and across, I would say, both the spirit world and the physical world. I believe in reincarnation. There's the part of me that is very curious about our souls being able to be in multiple lives. So like, for instance, my youngest brother, if he has been reincarnated, but he still finds me in this life.
Yeah.
I hope we find out. But I'm really curious what you think about that whole thing.
Yeah, it's a huge subject, isn't it? I get asked
Yeah.
about it often. And, like anyone else, I had to sit and think about this and what resonates with me and what feels right. And I would ask my guiding helpers, what is this? Because people are going to ask me about this. And from what my understanding is, yes, there is reincarnation, but there's not reincarnation the way people think. So if I live this life as Karen and I walk this path and I do what I do, and then I cross over to the spirit world, Karen doesn't get to come back again, because that experience in that lifetime was Karen's, right? But the spirit of me is the higher power. That's like, I'm spirit in human form. So that part of my spirit might reincarnate. So as in, you asked about your brother, or you were saying about your brother, his spirit is, huge. And it might be that he got to incarnate as your brother for that lifetime, but another part of his spirit can incarnate as someone else or have another lifetime, so that he evolves that through someone else or some other experience. So it is reincarnation, but it's not the same person that reincarnates, if that makes sense. Like, my lifetime is my lifetime, which means I will be in the spirit world when my loved ones come over there. That connection will take place, because people think, well, if my mum's reincarnated, does that mean I'll never get to see her again when I go over? And it causes confusion for people.
Right. And our spirits are probably, and I'm assuming you're going to say this, are just very expansive. And like, I think you're talking about, there could be fragmentation here, right? Or iterations of our spirit that goes into these different places. And then I think if you layer in the idea of past lives on top of this, like, there are things about my life right now, and I'm sure anyone listening and watching this, like, there are things like, you don't know why you have feelings about other places or things or locations or affinity for but you feel like it's something old. And it's like, to me, that feels like, I'm sure there's better wording for this, but the way I think about it is like that we have like spiritual or soul DNA that gets embedded with all of these like information points that linger with our physical manifestation when we come into this life. I don't know. Is that right?
100%. I agree with you on that. Yeah, 100%. I think that's a beautiful way to word it and for people to understand it, because it is complicated once you start looking into it further. And I think, people talk about past lives a lot. And I have a lot of people over the years that have said, oh, I've been told I was such and such in a past life, or this is what happened. And I always tell people, don't get consumed with it, because we are here and meant to be present. We are here to live this life and evolve in this life. And whilst we can feel things, feel drawn to things, like you say, things are embedded within the soul. It doesn't necessarily mean we're supposed to know about it. It doesn't mean that, we can take something and use it in this life to say, well, this is why, I drowned in a previous life, so I'm frightened of water.
Yeah.
Well, we're meant to be present in this life and being able to, kind of evolve ourselves now. So I think sometimes it can come in a good way, but also I think that people then tend to lean on it too. So sometimes I just say, don't worry about it. You'll find all that out when you go back over.
I 100% agree with this, especially because I'm so invested in healing and alchemizing our lives in this moment, that I do feel like you can get really caught up in the like perceived trauma of that time. That yes, like it's useful information, but to some people add it to their identity and to their trauma work. Yes. And that just adds a layer of difficulty that maybe isn't necessarily useful or helpful in this life, like you're saying. So I love that you said that, because I agree wholeheartedly with that too.
Yeah, it's hard. People sometimes are looking for a reason of why they feel a certain way, so it validates what they're
Yes.
feeling. But also, we don't have any evidence of it. I know that people do past life regression and things, and I'm not saying
Hmm.
that that doesn't work. But you have to remember that the mind is a very powerful thing as well. So let's say you
Hmm.
were watching a TV program when you were 4 years old, and there was something on it that happened that stayed within your subconscious mind. How do we know that that's not coming forward when you're being regressed? There's no evidence. Where with mediumship, when I bring someone through my mediumship, the father in the spirit world, I have to provide evidence. This is your dad, and this is what I'm picking up about him, and given details that I would never know, that were only personal to him, that you would know. That's evidential mediumship. But with regression and things, I'm like, well, I've had people saying to me, oh, I was Cleopatra in a previous life. And I think, how many millions of people have said that?
Yeah.
There's no evidence. So I tend to say, just try and stick with what you do know is true and right and
Hmm.
accurate for your life, and then
Hmm.
go forward with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. So, as a medium and an intuitive, like, how would you say for people who are curious about this ability, that I think a lot of people tend to say that, this is a birthright that belongs to all of us. I myself don't feel like, I have any super gifts. Sometimes I'll have intuitive hits or downloads, but I don't, hear the spirit world, or I don't get anything channeled. But for people that are curious, that they feel like they could have this, like, what are some things that you would tips about developing their senses in this modality that you could give to them?
Well, firstly, again, I agree with what you're saying, because I feel that now it's out there so much that anybody could be a medium. We all have this, and I don't believe that either.
Oh,
I
wow.
believe
Okay.
that I believe that mediums are born to be mediums, but we are all psychic, and that's
Mm.
different from mediumship. So psychic is about you, like in the spirit world, before you come here, you communicate mind to mind. There is nothing physical there. So when we come here, we still have that sixth sense. We still have that psychic ability to varying degrees. Some people might have a really high intuition. Someone else might just have a small intuition, but we all have it. We all use it. We all have a hunch or an intuition about something. That's your
Mm-hmm.
psychic ability. Now, everyone can develop their psychic ability to a degree. I'm not saying everyone can develop it and work as psychics. It's going to depend on how far your development can go with that. But mediumship is when you connect with those in the spirit world. You're actually connecting with those over there. And for me, I think that's something that you're born with, just as a singer is born to be a singer, or, an artist is born to be an artist. So I just feel that you're born with it. But if you are mediumistic, if you feel that you are mediumistic and you're looking to develop it, or indeed develop the psychic ability, then meditation is really important, because meditation takes you into that quiet place within yourself where you can connect with yourself. Because for any sort of development to take place, you have to understand who you are, and you have to understand your own power first, and where that comes from and what that feels like. So meditation's a great way to do that, just by getting into the little zone where you go into the quiet space of yourself, and you just feel what you feel, and you have the thoughts that you have. You can speak to guides and helpers, see if you get any signs, build a relationship with your spirit team, and then your development will start to take place from there.
Yeah, that's really good information. I appreciate you clarifying that, the difference between psychic and mediumship, and that's really interesting. So, in terms of spirit guides, I feel like everybody loves to talk about this this topic constantly, and I think I I have felt mine a couple times in my life. Again, like, not super. I just assume they're always here, like in the background, just doing what they need to do to
Mm-hmm.
keep me here. But for you, when you, like, what do you have to say for spirit guides, and like, what is your understanding of them? And then I have like a couple specific questions about spirit guides.
Yeah, so again, I agree with you. I think there's such an obsession with having to know your guides, your helpers, it's like that's the first thing you have to do, and it's really not. I didn't really know who my guides or helpers were for the first 2, 3, 4 years maybe of my mediumship development and my work. Not that I didn't want to know. I mean, of course I would have wanted to know,
Right.
and of course I would still, speak to them, even though I wasn't really receiving direct information from them. But for me, I think that people look for that first to feel like that's something special and that they have this guide that's telling them this, that, and the next thing. Well, that's not what guides do anyway. Your guides and your helpers and your team, because we have many different teachers in the spirit world. And it's like, I always say, if you went to year 1 in school, you would get a year 1 teacher. And if you went to year 5 in school, you would get a year 5 teacher. So our guides and
Oh, I
helpers
love
will,
that.
they'll come in and out as we need them. They'll come in and out for different life situations. I know for a fact that there's a guide that I connect with, and I know when he comes in, when I demonstrate mediumship, I have another guide that I feel coming in when I'm writing or teaching. So there's different guides and helpers for different things, but I was never obsessed with finding that. That information came to me. It kind of came to me through my mediumship. I was starting to get signs and words and pictures and visions, and I was able to start putting the pieces together, and then I started to feel the presence. And when you start to feel the presence, I mean, let's remember, it feels very real, and it is very real. So you can tell the difference whether it's just your thoughts or whether there's a presence there of that spirit. And then you can start to build your relationship. So when I talk to my guides and helpers, it's not every day. It's not every time I need something. That's another thing that people seem to think. I'm just going to ask my guides and miraculously something's going to happen. It doesn't work like that. So they are, like you said, in the background. They're doing what they're doing in the background, and they're guiding in the background. And that's really what it's for.
Mm-hmm. And then in terms of like bridging the language between like guardian angel versus spirit guide, or, other religions call it something else. Like when people have questions about that directly to you, how are you bridging? Like, are they the same people, or are they actually different? Or I'm really curious about that answer.
Well, your guides and your helpers can be anyone in the spirit world. So some guides that you might have walked the earth, they've lived a life here, they've
Yeah.
incarnated, so they know life, right? And then there's other guides and helpers you might get that have never really walked the earth, they're just higher, they're from higher realms. And then when you talk about angels, I feel that angels do exist. We call them angels, but it doesn't mean other cultures call them angels, because
Mm-hmm.
that's very cultural.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more about the higher power. So that I do know that there is obviously a higher power, there's higher realms, and that's where I would say your angels would be, the higher power, the highest power, whereas your guides and helpers aren't at that level, but they may be at a very highly evolved level and full of wisdom, and it's an overview of what's taken place. And then you'll have guides and helpers that have walked the earth, that have lived this life, that can help you with things on that front. So they all vary, but there are different realms in the spirit world.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so, as an example, like what could we ask our guides for help for? Like, what would be a good example, or a list of things that if we wanted to start engaging with them, that we could ask them for, or, collaborate with them?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is intention for your personal development. So
Hmm.
what I mean by that is, I don't feel like there's any point in not doing any personal development, but asking your guides and helpers to provide something. When you connect with the higher powers, really it's so that you have an intention of changing something, or an intention of getting to know yourself or developing yourself or helping other people, it might be, in whatever way that you can do that. So if you're in that position where you're looking for evolvement, you're looking for development, then the things that you would ask for are things like, please give me a sign that you're here. Please let me understand what this, how you're helping me, or please let me understand what I need to do to connect with you. I feel like it should always be about your intention to serve in some way, or your intention to let them know I'm ready for this change, or I'm ready to look at something different in my life, and how can I do that, and how can you help with that and facilitate that. And I think if you're always going in with the intention of doing, serving or changing something or evolving or developing, then I feel that you'll get your answers from your guides.
I really like that. Yeah. And I think that sometimes I think especially here in the West, because of like Western religion, there's always this sort of like impetus to be reactive about even our spiritual help, right? Like we go in and we're like, this thing is like going off the rails. I need help right now. But if we're intentionally communicating with them, for our higher good or for the intention of like developing ourselves, which I think is like such a beautiful baseline to start with, then it probably builds that connection a lot more deeply than just going in there and just being like, I'm so scared I'm not going to pass this test, or like I'm having a fight with my mom, or like, you know, my finances are in disarray, like I need help. But I feel like we have a propensity to go that route first for some reason over here.
Yeah, I think so. I think so too, and I think it's because humans we can be very demanding. We want
Yes.
we want it all now. Like nobody seems to have
Yes.
patience for these things, and spiritual development takes time, and that's another thing that I think now, from what I see, there's so much out there that's like, oh, well, do this course, and in 6 weeks, it means that you're going to be able to connect to your guides, and it means that you're going to be developing mediumship, and you're like, this is not what it should be about. It should be about understanding that if you feel a certain way or you want to develop a certain way, even if it's not mediumistically, then take your time. You know, understand who you truly are, understand what your higher spirit would say and what it would feel like, and connect there first. But instead, we do things like, oh, you know, I need that new house, and can you let me know if I'm getting the new house, or can you help me get the new house? And the spirit world aren't there for that. The guides are not there for that. The guides are never going to come in and say, okay, you know, we're going to grant your wish. They're not a genie in a bottle. You know, you're going to get a big check sent to you so you're out of financial difficulty. What they're going to be able to help with is guidance of, you're going to be okay. Go back to the drawing board. What do you need to do? You've got free will, and this life is your life. And likewise, a lot of people will come for readings because they're desperate for something, or they need direction in their own life. So they come for a psychic reading, and I can absolutely provide that. But I always do it from a point of view of, this is your life though. You have to make your decisions. No one's giving you a magic answer. You know, the spirit world don't interrupt or interfere with that.
I love that. But I also think there's like this entirely like cultural disempowerment of how Western religion and basically Abrahamic religion has created a disempowered mentality. And it's strange because you're constantly reminded that you have free will, but if you don't empower yourself or take action, it's like spirit can't answer. And that they go hand in hand. At least that's how I've understood it and how I felt it in my life as well. But leaving that mentality behind was everything, because there was like, it was almost like you were outsourcing, definitely in Abrahamic religion, like all of your power to God to fix things without really taking any like real physical action, which is huge, I think is what you're
Yeah,
saying here.
yeah, absolutely. And it's accountability and it's responsibility. The biggest thing that we have is personal responsibility. We are responsible for how we live our lives. We are responsible for how we treat other people. And
Yeah.
that doesn't come from religion. That comes from your very source. You know, you're here, you're not here to harm, you're here to do your best. That doesn't mean you won't harm people or you won't do something wrong in your life. Nobody's perfect, and we all come from different environmental backgrounds. Like you can't judge that. But when you're looking to make the change, it's not up to the spirit world to make that change. It's up to you to make that
Right.
change and kind of harness that. And even if you don't know like how to do it, like if someone's kind of saying, I don't know what I'm doing, but I know I need to do something, that's still some form of prayer. That's still some form of question to your guides and helpers and your team to say, I'm willing, I just need the help. I don't know the direction. And they will give you the direction, but you still have to do the work.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Karen, I love this approach. I think this will really help people. I did want to ask you as well, in your experience of source, God, you know, whatever you call it for yourself, if you could tell us, like, what do you experience that as, and what do you know for sure about it that can help people? And like, do you think we're fragments of God? Like, I'm really curious about your experience and how you articulate that to the collective.
Yeah, it's, from a young age, I remember being at school when I was 7 years old, and we were all asked that all the children were asked to draw a picture of God. And I remember sitting, looking at this blank piece of paper and thinking, I really don't know how to put this on the paper. But what I drew was just an outline of a person, but with no features, no eyes, nose, nothing like that, just the outline. That's all I drew. And when the teacher came and picked up my piece of paper, she said, what does that mean? What is that? And I said, well, that's God. And she said, well, there's nothing on there. And I said, yeah, because we are all inside that. And that was my take on it at 7 years old. Nobody told me that. That was just how I felt. And everyone else had drawn the generic pictures of Jesus, or, the man in robes and whatever. So, but my take on it was, we are all part of something. That was right away from an early age. And that's how I've kind of lived my life, knowing that there's a bigger connection, knowing that we are, I feel, fragments of God or the higher power, living in this life. And it just makes me feel so connected, and I don't know where I would be without that connection. Sometimes I think I'm so lucky and so blessed to know what I know and have that spirit connection, that really, if I, let's say in life, I'm doing, like, I remember moving house a few years ago and it was so stressful, and I remember feeling like all I want to do is sit and speak to spirit, and then I'll feel normal. And at the time, someone said to me, that's really not all that normal, And I said, it is for me. If I don't have that connection, for me, I feel like I'm a little bit lost. And that, I suppose, is the same for anyone who has a religion or a belief, or, say their prayers, any of that. But personally, for me, it's about feeling it. It's about living it. It's not about words. It's not about, people can say fancy prayers. And in fact, when I started my mediumship, I used to serve a lot of the local spiritualist churches in the UK. There's lots of them. And I think I served over 100 in the first year and the second year. And you have to follow a certain thing on there, and you say your prayers and have an address. And I remember listening to some mediums doing their prayers, and they were beautiful. They were gorgeous prayers. They were lovely words. And I always remember feeling like, I can't do that. Like, that's not me. For me, it was just simple. And I would say that to anybody, keep it simple. God or the higher power or your guide, your helpers, whoever you're praying to, can understand you perfectly fine. Nothing needs to be big and fancy and profound. It just needs to be from your soul. And that's what I feel God is, from the soul, your soul connection.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. I wanted to understand from your perspective, you talked about there's a lot more normalcy around, like, spiritual gifts and spirituality. But for you in this life, where do you see us going as a species here on Earth? Because I think it seems to be like, and I don't know for sure because it's hard because it's the media, right? But there's like a divide of people who want to hang on to religion, and then there's like another group that doesn't want to, and both of us can be right and both of us can be wrong. But in terms of like spiritual development as a species, like, where do you see us evolving to in the next coming, decades, hundreds of years? Like, what do you think is going to happen?
I do feel that there has been an awakening. I do feel that more and more people are more aware of what life is supposed to be, or what we truly are here for. Now, that doesn't mean that we're all on the same path with that,
Right.
but it just means that I think people, I don't know, I think people have gotten to such a level now where so many things across the globe are going wrong, or there's war, or there's things going on. And I just feel like people are starting to kind of awaken to the fact that we have all been led along the way, like we're, like you said earlier, we're very dulled down. We're meant to just follow a certain suit and do as we are told from our governments, and this, that, and the next thing. And I think for some reason, over the next sort of 5, 10, 15 years, there's just going to be a turnaround on that. I think people are wakening up, and I think that they're wakening up because they're feeling their own power now. They're hearing their own voice, and I just feel that needed to happen. And for me, I just feel like it's a very natural evolution of what should happen. But over the next tens of years, yes, I feel that people will be far more in touch with their higher self. Even when, people are talking about medications now, all the things that are coming out about medications and what actually closes your third eye and what opens it and what lets you connect to your own self, all of that's changing. There's much more of a holistic kind of way of life coming forward now. So that can only be good for us reconnecting, because we live in such a world of technology and disconnection. I mean, we connect with technology every single day, which is wonderful in some ways, but in other ways we have lost our own connection to ourself and our higher self. I don't know, a lot, a lot of kids especially, everything's bang on computers and technology, and you're like, just take a walk in the park, or just feel the grass beneath your feet, or just connect with nature. It doesn't happen anymore. So I think now, though, people are kind of going back the way to that and kind of rediscovering this. So that can only be a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, like you could say, like technology is in some ways replacing religion because it's taking us outside of ourselves. And I think to your point earlier, like when you were talking about how you identify source, and it's like, I feel like what you're saying also is that's like a very embodied experience. Like, yes, you're saying I need to sit down with source, but it's probably an embodied experience that you feel inside of yourself and outside of yourself. Like both things are happening at the same time and within your mind. And it's hard to do that if we're distracted or if we're indoctrinated. There's so many like complex layers to the human experience. There's also like the fact that we don't want to connect to source when we feel pain either. And we really reject being able to call in help when we're in pain. And I think that adds another complex layer to how we stay disconnected from source. And I know for me in my journey, I rejected it. And, I went like atheist for like 2 to 4 weeks or something. Cause I was like, I need to know if like, do I believe in God or a source? Because that's what was drilled into me from day one? Or do I truly, truly in my body and like my soul feel? And at the end of the day, I'm like, I don't know what's out there. I still don't know. I'm still skeptical. I'm still curious. I want to know what is, what is out there and what it is. And like, if it's form or formless, but I shook out with the fact that like, I know I can't live in a place or in this place that not being connected to source.
Yeah, I think that your mind also is a huge thing, because, if you live within your mind, then your mind will always keep you disconnected. Your mind is logical. It's there to bring, answers to things, and it doesn't always bring the right answers. It can throw up answers that really aren't correct for what you need to do. Like if you have an intuition, let's say, so by having your intuition about a situation, that's you connecting to your spirit. But your mind will jump in and say, well, I don't think you should do that. I think you should go this way, this path. And because the human wants that path, so let's say it was about a relationship and the relationship's not that good for you, or it's the wrong relationship. Your soul will tell you that. Your higher self will tell you that this doesn't feel right. There's something wrong here. You need to listen to this. And your mind will say, but I want that person, so I'm going to go that route, right? So your mind's going to jump in and confuse that of what you really should be doing for your peace, for your inner peace, for what's right for you. And that's fine too, because then what happens is we learn our lesson. We go down the wrong path, and then we think, oh, I knew I shouldn't have done that, or, and then you learn from that and you evolve and grow anyway. But that staying in that mind in whatever capacity will always disconnect you from your truer self. And it's your truer self that's like the inner sat nav that will guide you through your life. But as humans, we don't want to hear it sometimes, so we avoid.
Yeah. It's so funny you say that, because I think at some point, like when I started learning about spirituality, astrology, about the other side, NDEs, basically I decided I don't know that we could ever take a wrong step. Like I just don't, even when we're making mistakes, it's still the right step. And it's really interesting to think about it in that way, because like you said, we still learn something, or it changes us, or it gives us like wisdom for another experience. And I think in some ways that may be really hard for people to hear, because if we never take a wrong step, but we create our own suffering by taking a wrong step, it's hard to acknowledge that, right?
Yeah, it sure is. It sure is. And I think sometimes it's easier to think that someone else has done something. So I know, and for the good as well, because also we don't understand how powerful we are and how much we can do things in life. So I think that that's why people connect it to something external. Like they'll say, oh, my guide told me this, whatever it was, but it's actually not a guide telling you that. It's your higher self telling you that, because that's who you truly are. But people want to kind of make it external so that they don't have the responsibility of it,
Mm-hmm.
or they don't believe that they can do it, so that's what happens in those circumstances.
We're so silly. I'm mindful of the time here, so I want to just check in with you. So if there's anything else that we want to discuss before we wrap up the interview about mediumship, the spirit world, source, the psychic abilities, anything that is sort of circling around that we didn't get to that we should maybe touch on with the audience.
Yeah, I think a big thing for me, and the more I hear, the more podcasts I do, and the more I speak to people, there are a lot of people out there that feel they're drawn to psychic development. There are a lot of people out there that feel they want to explore that kind of thing. And I always say to people, you should do it. Definitely have a look at it, but not because I think everyone is going to work as a medium or everyone's going to work as a psychic. Really just to, like we've been talking about, connect to yourself, because if you can truly do that and learn your psychic ability and learn that you have the power to pick things up intuitively and sensitively, then it does improve your life and for whatever you do. So it's never about working as a medium or working. Obviously, there's people there that want to do it for that reason, and they should. But there's also the majority of people are going to want to understand their own psychic ability for the very reason it will better their own lives.
Yeah, that's really good. I think that's really important. So where can everyone connect with you online or social media? And then do you have anything coming up that's important events or speaking engagements that we should let the audience know about?
Yeah, so my website is KarenDocherty.com and everything is on there. So all my podcasts go on there, my interviews, other pieces of writing that I've done about the work as well. Readings, all the sessions are all on there. Also, what's on there that I do tell people about is a mentorship program, and that is basically because when I was in development, early development, I always felt like there was nobody there to ask these questions. I couldn't ask anybody. Nobody was there really to reach out to. So I had to do a lot of it myself. And I do remember feeling like when I'm at a place in my life where I can offer help, that's what I will be doing. So the teaching mentorship program can help anyone who is looking to explore. And there are different levels of that as well. So that's something that people can go on the website and have a look at. And you do have to apply for it. And I do monitor the applications and see if I feel it's right for someone as well. Because again, the message that's out there now is, everyone can do this, come along and be a medium, and that's just not the message that I put out. But come along for your development, come along for your personal development, and I will help you. And then if you are supposed to be working psychically or mediumistically, then that's going to come as well. So the mentorship program is also on the website.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. And then I always like to end the podcast in gratitude and check with my guest about 3 things they're grateful for this week, this year, this month, whatever is sort of rattling around in your heart chakra.
Yeah, gratitude's a huge thing. And I think that most days I'll say a gratitude prayer. I won't lie about it and say it's every day, because then, one day I'll forget and the next day I'm like, I never even said that yesterday. So most of the time I will always say a gratitude prayer, and really grateful. I keep it very simple. I'm just really grateful for my life, number one, and my life's path and what I get to do. That's huge for me, because mediumship is my life in that sense. So I'm always grateful for that. I'm always grateful for the loved ones that I have around me and people that have touched my life in some way, and vice versa. And I'm always very grateful for health. And these 3 things for me are the basis of everything. It's never about material things for me. It's always about the soul, the life, and what I get to do with my time when I'm here.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, thank you for being on this show and for coming here today. I will be issuing a notification about the podcast ending at the end of this year. So you are my last episode, and anyone listening to this will hear this probably as a surprise. But I'm grateful that I was able to bookend you in the totality of the podcast at the end of it. So thank you so much for coming to the show, Karen, and for the work you do and the work that you do for the collective, because it's really important to help us start to bridge that, that gap between our souls and our physical world. That it's just so important that we don't forget that we're not just this physical body.
Yeah, thank you, Krista. Thank you for inviting me as well. It's been an absolute pleasure. I think anybody that can talk about this subject and help people and serve people, that's what it's all about.
This podcast was written, directed, and produced by me, your host, Krista Ziomara, in alignment with Light Casting. Music curated and created by Mr. Pixie. You can find I'm Awake Now What on all social media channels by searching IANW Podcast. Head over to your favorite podcast app and subscribe, download, rate, and review. Come back every Sunday to partake in a new and enlightening conversation. May you be filled with love and light until we meet again.